he feels it. An emptiness he can't explain. A craving he can't silence. A missing piece he keeps reaching for. And every time, his soul points back to you. And you, as the divine feminine, can feel his longing in your body. You know exactly what he's missing, and part of you wants to give it, to soothe him, to carry him, to make it easier. But here's the sacred truth. You cannot give him what only his soul can awaken. Because if you do, he will lean on your energy instead of standing in his own. And this journey was never about you completing him. It was always about him remembering his wholeness. So yes, he is missing something, but it's not yours to hand over. It's his to rise into. Have you ever felt the pull to rescue him, even when you knew it wasn't your role? What he feels is missing but can't name. There's a space inside the divine masculine that he cannot put words to, a hollow place that lingers no matter how much he achieves, how many people he surrounds himself with, or how many distractions he chases. It is the silent ache he carries in the background of his life, an emptiness that follows him everywhere. At times, he mistakes it for loneliness. At other times, he tells himself it's a lack of success, money, purpose, or recognition. He thinks, if I just work harder, if I just win more, if I just prove myself, maybe this feeling will go away. But it never does. Because what he is missing cannot be found in the external world. It is not something anyone can hand him. And deep down, he knows this, but he does not yet know how to face it. This emptiness is his soul calling. It is the gap between the man he has tried to be and the soul he actually is. And until he faces that truth, no amount of love, validation, or comfort will fill it. That's why even when the divine feminine pours out her energy, he still feels incomplete. He may feel momentary relief, but the ache always returns because it was never hers to resolve. You, as the divine feminine, can sense this in him. You feel the pull in his energy, like a thirst that seems to reach out toward you. You recognize what he's missing: love, depth, presence, truth, and every part of your being wants to give it, because that's who you are. You embody overflow, you nurture, you carry light, and yet, if you give him what he cannot name, you also take away his chance to find it within himself. The masculine may not realize this consciously, but he is being invited into the most sacred confrontation of his journey, to sit with his own void, to face the discomfort, to realize that what he longs for is not outside of him, not even in you, but in his own willingness to awaken. And this is why it feels so unbearable for him, because it strips away every mask, every illusion, every role he thought would make him whole. He is missing himself. That is the truth he cannot yet articulate. He is missing his own alignment, his own wholeness, his own connection to the part of him that has always been divine. And though you reflect that back to him with every breath, you cannot do it for him. The ache in him is not a punishment, it's an invitation. But it's an invitation he alone must accept. And here lies the test for the feminine: to resist the urge to rush in, to rescue, to complete, to feel his longing and not confuse it with your responsibility. To recognize that even though he craves you, what he is truly craving is the version of himself that awakens in your presence. And until he chooses that for himself, anything you give will only delay his recognition. So ask yourself, when you feel his absence reaching for you, are you willing to hold your ground? Are you willing to let him fill the emptiness until he realizes it is his to fill? Because that is the moment he stops searching outside and begins to awaken within. Why the feminine is not meant to fill that void. The divine feminine often feels the ache of the masculine more strongly than he does. She feels it in her chest, in her body, in her spirit. His longing echoes through her field, and it stirs something deep inside her natural instinct to nurture, to heal, to soften, to complete. She feels the pull to step in, to give what she knows he is missing, to quiet his restlessness with the love that flows so naturally from her. But this is where the sacred paradox of the twin flame journey reveals itself. As much as she wants to give, she is not meant to, because the feminine is not here to carry what only the masculine can awaken within himself. When she steps in too quickly to fill his emptiness, she robs him of the opportunity to face it. She softens the ache that was designed to wake him up. She shields him from the very discomfort that would have pushed him to grow. What feels like love in the moment becomes enabling in the larger journey. And slowly, without realizing it, she begins to carry weight that was never hers to hold. This is not about punishment or withholding affection. It's about alignment. The masculine cannot rise into his truth if he is constantly leaning on the feminine's energy as a crutch. He must learn to anchor his own light, to claim his own wholeness, to face his own shadows without demanding her energy as a balm. If she fills the void for him, he never discovers that he was capable of doing it himself. The feminine's love is meant to inspire, not to rescue, to reflect, not to replace, to embody wholeness so that he remembers it is possible, but not to give her wholeness away so that he can delay remembering his own. This is why so many feminines feel drained when they overgive, because they are pouring into a space that only the masculine soul can fill. He may crave her comfort. He may reach for her energy. He may even convince himself and her that if only she gives more, everything will be okay. But the truth is, the void inside him is not hers to resolve. It is his initiation, his sacred turning point, his opportunity to face himself. And when she holds back, when she refuses to hand him what he must find within, something powerful happens. He feels the ache more sharply. The distractions that once worked no longer soothe him. The silence that once felt safe becomes unbearable. And in that tension, he has no choice but to look inward. That is when the awakening begins. So, beloved feminine, understand this. You are not being cold when you resist overgiving. You are being sacred. You are not withholding love. You are honoring love's highest form. Because love that rescues is temporary. But love that refuses to replace his responsibility is eternal. Ask yourself, how many times have you tried to give him what he was missing, only to feel emptier yourself? And what if the very thing you withheld was the catalyst that would have forced him to rise? Because the truth is, the masculine is not missing you. He is missing himself. And only by not giving him what he longs for can you hold the mirror steady enough for him to finally see that. How overgiving delays his awakening. The divine feminine's heart is generous by design. She is the embodiment of overflow, of nourishment, of unconditional presence. And when she feels the ache in the masculine, her first instinct is to soothe it, to pour love into the places where he feels empty, to give him more than he even asks for, hoping it will ease the weight he carries. But here lies the hidden danger. When the feminine gives too much, too soon, she unintentionally delays his awakening. Why? Because the pain he feels, that gnawing sense of something missing, is not a flaw. It's a catalyst. It's the fire that is meant to push him inward, to strip away his defenses, to make him finally face himself. When she steps in and covers that ache with her love, she interrupts the process. The fire cools, the urgency lessens. He learns not to confront the emptiness, but to depend on her to manage it for him. And the awakening that should have come through struggle gets postponed. Overgiving may feel like devotion, but often it becomes substitution. Instead of him finding the strength within himself, he borrows hers. Instead of him leaning into his own soul, he leans into her energy. And the balance between them becomes distorted. She becomes the constant source, and he becomes the constant receiver. This does not mean the masculine is ungrateful or manipulative. Many times he doesn't even realize what's happening. He feels the relief of her presence, the comfort of her love, and he confuses that relief with healing. But relief is not transformation. It is temporary. And when the feminine keeps handing him that relief, he never discovers that he has the power to create it from within. For the feminine, the cost is just as high. The more she gives, the more she feels depleted. The more she carries his weight, the less energy she has to hold her own truth. Slowly, she starts to feel resentful, unseen, or unbalanced. Not because she doesn't love him, but because she's been giving him what was never hers to give. And so the cycle repeats. He avoids the void. She fills it. He remains dependent, and she becomes exhausted. This is not union. This is delay. The sacred path requires something far harder: restraint. For the feminine to stand in her power, to feel his longing, to feel his pull, and to resist the urge to answer it. Not out of rejection, not out of punishment, but out of wisdom. Because she knows that the ache must break him open. She knows that what hurts him most will also heal him most, but only if he doesn't escape it through her energy. When she stops overgiving, the masculine begins to notice the void in its full intensity. The distractions stop working, the silence grows louder, the ache becomes unbearable, and finally he turns inward. Finally, he asks the questions he has avoided. Who am I without her energy holding me? What am I running from? Why do I keep searching outside myself for what only I can awaken? And that is the moment of truth. The moment when overgiving stops being a shield, and the absence of it becomes the mirror. The feminine's restraint doesn't mean she doesn't love him. It means she loves him enough to let him face what terrifies him, because only then will he rise as her equal, not her dependent. So, beloved feminine, look at the places where you've been overgiving. Ask yourself, am I truly helping him awaken? Or am I cushioning him from the awakening he needs to have? Because every time you pour too much, you delay his encounter with himself. And the greatest act of love you can offer is to step back. So he has no choice but to step forward. Every time the divine masculine looks at the divine feminine, something inside him stirs. He may not admit it. He may not even understand it, but her presence unsettles the parts of him that he has spent a lifetime hiding. She doesn't just reflect his beauty or his potential. She reflects his wounds, his fears, and the emptiness he's tried to bury. And that is why she is the most powerful mirror he will ever face. In the early stages, this mirror feels unbearable for him. When she radiates love, it exposes the parts of him that doubt whether he deserves it. When she stands in her power, it highlights his avoidance of his own. When she embodies truth, it makes his lies and masks impossible to maintain. This is why he runs. Not because he doesn't feel the connection, but because the mirror shows him more than he believes he can handle. But here's the sacred design of this journey. The mirror is not there to punish him. It's there to awaken him. The feminine doesn't need to lecture him, fix him, or convince him of who he is. She simply has to remain rooted in her truth. Because the more she embodies her light, the clearer his reflection becomes. And eventually, the discomfort of avoiding that reflection grows heavier than the fear of facing it. When she overgives, she actually softens the mirror. She steps in to cover his wounds, to cushion his pain, and the reflection becomes blurred. He can still avoid himself because she is carrying what he refuses to look at. But when she holds her ground, when she refuses to rescue him, the mirror becomes sharp again. It shows him everything he has denied. And that raw, unfiltered reflection is what triggers his breakthrough. This breakthrough rarely happens in a dramatic instant. Often it unfolds quietly in the solitude of his own heart. One night, he may hear her words echo in his mind and realize they were never about her trying to control him. They were about him learning to see himself. Another day, he may look at the patterns in his life and finally admit that he has been running not from her, but from himself. And in that moment of honesty, the mirror stops being something to fear and becomes something to lean into. The feminine's role is not to hand him the answers, but to embody the questions, to stand as the living reminder of what alignment looks like, so that he can no longer pretend he doesn't know the truth. Her restraint, her refusal to carry what isn't hers, forces him to encounter the only person who can fill his void, himself. And this is where the alchemy begins. He stops trying to escape the reflection and starts to receive it. He begins to see her strength not as a threat, but as an invitation. He begins to recognize that her love is not there to patch his wounds, but to show him where healing is possible. And he realizes that the feminine was never asking him to be perfect. She was only asking him to be real. This mirror is sacred because it dismantles illusions. It strips him bare. It removes every excuse, every mask, every false identity he has clung to. And though it terrifies him, it also liberates him. Because once he sees himself clearly, he can no longer pretend to be less than he is. He can no longer hide behind the emptiness. He has to choose, continue running, or finally rise. So ask yourself, Divine Feminine, have you been softening the mirror out of fear he will leave? Or are you willing to let it shine, even if it makes him uncomfortable? Because only when you hold the mirror steady will he finally break through the illusions that have kept him small and step into the man his soul has always known he is. One of the most delicate lessons in the twin flame journey is understanding the line between supporting the masculine and enabling him. At first glance, these two may look alike. Both involve giving, both involve presence, both come from love. But their roots are different, and their outcomes are worlds apart. Support empowers him to grow. Enabling allows him to remain the same. Support holds space without carrying his burden. Enabling carries it for him so he doesn't have to face it. Support says, I believe you can rise into your own power. Enabling says, I don't trust that you'll ever get there, so I'll do it for you. And while the first creates transformation, the second creates dependence. The Divine Feminine, with her open heart and infinite capacity for love, often struggles with this line. She feels his ache so strongly that she confuses rescuing him with loving him. She gives more energy than she has, pours from an empty cup, and tells herself it's devotion. But in truth, when she enables him, she is quietly agreeing with his own fear, the fear that he cannot do it alone. Support, however, looks very different. It is steady but not overbearing. It is compassionate but not indulgent. It is the quiet strength of holding space, of mirroring truth, of refusing to collapse into his chaos. It is the choice to remain rooted in her own alignment, knowing that her light is more powerful when it shines freely than when it is drained by overgiving. This is the sacred balance of energy. When she supports him correctly, she becomes a mirror, not a crutch. He is forced to confront the parts of himself he has ignored because she is no longer carrying them for him. He learns to anchor his own strength, his own clarity, his own light. And while it may be uncomfortable for both of them, it is the only way union can be built on truth. Enabling may feel easier in the moment. It may quiet his restlessness, soothe his pain, and make her feel useful. But it does not create growth. It keeps him dependent on her energy, keeps her exhausted, and keeps both of them trapped in cycles of imbalance. And eventually, it delays union because the masculine cannot arrive whole if the feminine has been holding half of him for him. The paradox is this: the more she pulls back from enabling, the more powerful her love actually becomes. Because he no longer mistakes her energy for his own. He begins to notice the void, to feel the hunger, to realize that what he is missing cannot be poured into him by her. He must cultivate it within himself. Her refusal to overgive becomes the very force that drives him inward, the very thing that awakens him. So, Divine Feminine, the balance is not about giving nothing. It is about giving rightly, about recognizing when your presence empowers him and when it shields him, about asking yourself, am I helping him step into himself, or am I keeping him from himself by doing it for him? And perhaps the hardest truth of all, sometimes the most loving thing you can do is nothing. Not because you don't care, but because you care enough to let him face the weight of his own awakening. Because only in that weight will he find the strength to rise. The Divine Masculine's longing can be one of the most confusing energies to witness. To the feminine, it often feels like mixed signals. He craves her energy. He reaches for her in the unseen. She feels him pulling at her heart and body. Yet he remains silent, distant, or physically absent. She wonders, if he longs for me, why doesn't he come? If he feels this pull, why won't he act? The truth is, his longing is not a weakness. It is not immaturity. It is not him playing games. His longing is proof of an inner shift that he cannot yet translate into action. It is evidence that the old distractions no longer satisfy him, that the escapes no longer numb him, that the denial no longer holds. This longing is sacred. In the past, he could run into silence, into busyness, into relationships that didn't ask too much of him. He could drown his truth in noise and convince himself that he was fine. But once the feminine awakens in his field, once he tastes even a fragment of her presence, the old ways stop working, the ache begins. The emptiness gets louder. He may try to ignore it, but it follows him everywhere. That ache is his soul remembering her. That longing is his soul remembering himself. The feminine feels this ache because she is connected to it. She may wake in the night with his presence heavy in her chest. She may feel sudden waves of sadness or desire that don't belong to her. She may crave him in moments when she wasn't even thinking of him. And she wonders, is this me or is this him? The answer is both. Because his longing moves through her, but it originates in him. And yet, here lies the sacred challenge. As much as she feels his pull, she cannot be the one to relieve it. If she rushes in to meet his longing, to feed it, to give him what he aches for, she short-circuits the process. She numbs the very discomfort that was designed to wake him up. His longing is not a mistake. It is medicine. It is the tension that forces him to confront himself. It is the gap that shows him what he has been avoiding. It is the reminder that he cannot keep living half asleep. And while it may look like weakness, it is actually strength. Because longing is the beginning of surrender. Longing is the crack in the armor. Longing is the proof that his soul has already begun the journey back to truth. For the feminine, this is where faith is required. Faith to feel his energy pulling and not run to him. Faith to sense his ache and not try to soothe it. Faith to trust that the ache is not killing him, it is birthing him. That his longing is the labor pains of his awakening. And that if she answers too soon, she interrupts his birth. His longing is not for her to solve, it is for him to face. And the moment he learns to sit with it, to stop numbing it, to stop outsourcing it, is the moment he steps into his breakthrough. That is when he stops seeing her as the source of his completion and starts seeing her as the reflection of his own. So the next time you feel his presence heavy on your heart, instead of rushing to give, ask yourself, what if this is not a call to move, but a call to trust? What if his longing is not proof of his weakness, but proof that his awakening has already begun? Because the truth is, his longing is not a setback. It is a sign that the masculine is being pulled back into alignment, a sign that the soul has already started the work, a sign that, even in silence, union is already moving. There comes a moment in every twin flame journey when the feminine must face the hardest truth of all. You cannot walk his path for him. You cannot fill his void. You cannot silence his ache. You cannot carry him across the threshold of his awakening. No matter how much you love him, no matter how deeply you feel his pull, no matter how strongly you sense his longing, he must rise on his own. This is not cruelty. It is not abandonment. It is sacred design. Because if you hand him the answers, if you give him the wholeness he has not yet claimed, you rob him of the very transformation that would make him capable of true union. The divine masculine was never meant to be rescued. He was meant to be reborn, and rebirth only comes when he chooses it for himself. Think of how many times you felt the urge to step in, to reassure him when he was silent, to chase him when he pulled away, to pour love into him when you felt his ache in your chest. Every time it came from love. But did it bring him closer to himself, or did it teach him to depend on your energy instead of his own? Did it empower him to awaken, or did it let him hide from the very void that was calling him into truth? The feminine's greatest power is not in rescuing, but in reflecting, not in overgiving, but in embodying. When you hold your ground, when you stand rooted in your own wholeness, when you refuse to hand him what is his to claim, you give him the greatest gift. The mirror, a mirror so clear, so unwavering, that he has no choice but to face himself. And yes, it hurts. It hurts to feel his longing and not answer it. It hurts to sense his pull and not run to him. It hurts to know you could ease his pain but choose not to. But what hurts now becomes the doorway to what lasts forever. Because only when he rises on his own does union become truth. Anything less is dependency, and dependency cannot hold the weight of a divine love. This is why you must let him rise, because union was never about you giving him pieces of yourself until he feels whole. It was about him remembering his own wholeness, so that when he stands before you, it is not as someone needing to be filled, but as someone overflowing. It is about two complete beings choosing each other freely, not two halves trying to fix what they believe is missing. And here is the paradox. The more you hold back, the closer he comes. The more you resist carrying him, the faster he learns to carry himself. The more you refuse to fill his void, the more he is forced to fill it with his own light. This is not distance. This is alignment. This is not punishment. This is preparation. So, beloved feminine, hear this. His longing is not your responsibility. His emptiness is not your assignment. His awakening is not your burden. You are not here to be his savior. You are here to be his mirror. And when you stand strong in that truth, you become the very catalyst his soul has been waiting for. Ask yourself, are you ready to let go of the need to fix him so that he can finally fix himself? Are you willing to hold your love steady, not by giving it all away, but by embodying it so fully that he has no choice but to awaken into his own? Because in the end, the only way he will ever truly see you as his divine feminine is when he has seen himself as the divine masculine. And that, beloved, is something you cannot do for him. That is why you must let him rise.